Something big just happened in the world of technology, and most people haven't fully realized what it means yet. For decades, Linux has been seen as the underdog, powerful, yes. Flexible, absolutely. But always living in the shadow of Windows on the desktop. Businesses relied on Windows. Gamers relied on Windows. Students, offices, creators, almost everyone defaulted to Windows without even thinking about it. Linux was the alternative. The enthusiast's choice. The developer's playground. The server king that never quite conquered the everyday PC. But now something has shifted. And this shift doesn't just improve Linux, it changes Linux forever. And if you're Microsoft, it's not good news. To understand why this moment matters, we need to look at what held Linux back for so long. It wasn't performance. It wasn't security, it wasn't even stability. In many ways, Linux outperformed Windows in those areas for years. The real issue was fragmentation, hardware compatibility, software support, and user experience consistency. New users would install a distribution, face driver issues, struggle with proprietary software, or feel overwhelmed by too many choices. Meanwhile, Windows offered a predictable environment backed by massive corporate resources and vendor partnerships. That predictability kept Windows on top. But over the last few years, the Linux ecosystem quietly started solving its biggest pain points. Hardware support improved dramatically. Major OEMs began shipping laptops with Linux pre-installed. Companies that once ignored Linux began optimizing their software for it. Gaming support, once a joke in the Linux world, transformed into something nobody saw coming. Proton compatibility layers matured. Vulkan drivers improved. Anti-cheat systems that once blocked Linux users started enabling support. The result? Thousands of Windows games now run seamlessly on Linux with performance that often rivals or even exceeds Windows. And then there's the Steam Deck effect. When Valve bet heavily on Linux as the foundation for its handheld gaming device, many were skeptical. But the Steam Deck didn't just succeed, it legitimized Linux gaming in the eyes of millions. Suddenly, Linux wasn't a hobbyist experiment. It was powering one of the most exciting gaming platforms in years. Developers optimized for it. Gamers experienced it without even realizing they were using Linux. That subtle shift changed perception, and perception is everything. At the same time, Windows began making controversial moves. Increased telemetry, aggressive integration of ads, account requirements tied to online services, hardware restrictions, forced updates that disrupted workflows. AI features deeply embedded into the system, whether users asked for them or not. For some, these changes felt innovative. For others, they felt invasive. Power users started looking around and asking a question that once seemed unthinkable: is there a better alternative? And Linux was ready with an answer. Modern Linux distributions have become shockingly polished. Installers are streamlined, driver detection is smarter. Desktop environments are visually refined and intuitive. Software centers make application management simple and centralized. For many everyday users, the experience is no longer intimidating. It's smooth, fast, and refreshingly free of bloat. The performance difference is especially noticeable on older hardware. Machines that struggle under Windows suddenly feel new again under Linux. That alone is powerful. But the biggest change isn't just technical, it's strategic. Large corporations are investing in Linux not as a niche experiment, but as a core platform. Cloud computing runs on Linux. Containers and Kubernetes ecosystems revolve around Linux. AI workloads overwhelmingly prefer Linux environments. Developers building modern applications are targeting Linux-first infrastructure. In the enterprise world, Linux is no longer secondary, it's foundational. And when the foundation of the tech industry runs on Linux, it inevitably strengthens the desktop story too. There's also the shift toward open standards and open ecosystems. Governments and institutions concerned about digital sovereignty are reconsidering their reliance on proprietary platforms. Some are exploring Linux deployments to reduce licensing costs and increase control over their infrastructure. Educational institutions are experimenting with Linux labs to empower students with open tools, instead of locking them into one vendor's ecosystem. Each of these decisions chips away at the automatic dominance Windows once enjoyed. Meanwhile, the developer community continues to drive innovation at a pace that's hard to match. Because Linux is open source, improvements happen collaboratively across the globe. Bugs are fixed transparently. Features evolve based on real-world needs. New display servers like Wayland mature. File systems advance. Security models harden. And unlike proprietary systems, users have the freedom to customize nearly every layer of their environment. That flexibility used to intimidate newcomers. Now it empowers them. The rise of containerization and virtualization has also blurred operating system boundaries. Developers can package applications in ways that reduce dependency issues and improve portability. Flatpak and similar technologies make installing complex software dramatically easier for users. This addresses one of Linux's historic weaknesses: dependency chaos. With sandbox packaging formats becoming mainstream, Linux desktops feel more cohesive and predictable. Then there's performance efficiency. Linux distributions often require fewer system resources than modern Windows builds. In an era where hardware prices fluctuate and sustainability matters more than ever, extending the lifespan of existing devices becomes attractive. Instead of upgrading hardware to meet the latest OS requirements, users can switch to Linux and regain performance without spending money. That economic factor cannot be ignored. Security is another area where Linux's architecture shines. While no operating system is immune to vulnerabilities, Linux's permission model and open development process offer transparency that many users appreciate. Security patches are often deployed rapidly. Community auditing reduces the risk of hidden backdoors. In a time where cybersecurity headlines dominate the news, trust matters. And trust in open systems continues to grow. But perhaps the most significant transformation is cultural. Linux used to market itself defensively, emphasizing freedom and openness as philosophical ideals. Now it markets itself through capability, through performance benchmarks, through gaming compatibility charts, through professional workflows running smoothly on open platforms. The narrative is shifting from Linux is good for enthusiasts to Linux is good, period. Windows still dominates the consumer desktop market, but dominance is not permanence. Technology history is filled with giants who assumed their position was uncheckable. What changes industries isn't always a single product, it's momentum. And Linux has momentum. Developers are choosing it. Startups are building on it. Gamers are experimenting with it. Governments are evaluating it. Enterprises are standardizing on it. Even Microsoft's own strategy reveals the shift. The company embraces Linux within its cloud services. It contributes to the Linux kernel. It integrates Linux subsystems into Windows itself. These moves acknowledge a simple truth: Linux isn't going away. It's too central to modern computing. Ironically, by integrating Linux into its ecosystem, Microsoft reinforces Linux's relevance. For everyday users, the barrier to entry has never been lower. You can download a Linux distribution, create a bootable USB, and test the system without even installing it. You can dual boot, you can migrate gradually. Community forums offer guidance for nearly any hardware configuration. Tutorials are abundant. YouTube channels demonstrate step-by-step setups. The intimidation factor that once scared newcomers has faded. And as AI-driven development tools proliferate, Linux benefits even more. Many machine learning frameworks are optimized for Linux environments. GPU drivers for compute workloads are often more robust there. Developers' training models or running inference pipelines frequently prefer Linux for its flexibility and performance. As AI becomes integrated into workflows across industries, that preference amplifies Linux's strategic advantage. The story isn't about Linux replacing Windows overnight. It's about options. For the first time in a long time, the alternative feels equally viable. When users realize they have a choice that doesn't require compromise, market dynamics change. Even if only a percentage switch, that percentage represents millions of devices, millions of licenses not renewed, millions of users exploring open ecosystems. For Windows, this creates pressure. Competition forces improvement. If users leave due to privacy concerns or performance issues, Microsoft must respond. That could mean lighter system requirements, more transparent data policies, better user control over updates and features. Ironically, Linux's rise may improve Windows for everyone. But make no mistake, this shift is profound. Linux is no longer just the backbone of servers and supercomputers. It's a credible, polished, user-friendly desktop operating system capable of handling gaming, productivity, development, and creative work. It's adaptable across laptops, desktops, handheld consoles, embedded systems, and cloud infrastructure. Few platforms can claim that breadth. The next few years will determine how far this transformation goes. Will OEMs expand Linux offerings? Will more software vendors release native Linux builds? Will gaming studios treat Linux support as standard rather than optional? The trajectory suggests growth, not decline. And that's why this changes Linux forever, because the conversation has shifted from "can Linux compete?" to "how much of the market can Linux capture?" That psychological shift alone alters the industry landscape. For Windows, it's not the end. But it is a challenge unlike any before. The comfortable monopoly era is fading into a competitive reality. Users are more informed. Developers are more platform agnostic. Infrastructure is more cloud-driven. Hardware is more diverse. In that environment, openness and adaptability become strengths. Linux has matured. It has unified key experiences without sacrificing flexibility. It has gained corporate backing without losing community roots. It has solved many of the practical obstacles that once limited its reach. And as those obstacles disappear, the reasons to avoid Linux shrink. This isn't just an update. It's a turning point. A convergence of technological maturity, strategic investment, and shifting user expectations. Linux didn't suddenly become powerful, it always was. What changed is accessibility. What changed is perception. What changed is readiness. And when perception aligns with capability, industries move. The underdog narrative no longer applies. Linux stands not as a rebellious alternative, but as a legitimate mainstream contender. Whether you're a gamer, a developer, a student, or a business professional, the gap between Linux and Windows has narrowed to the point where switching is no longer radical. It's rational. That's why this moment matters. That's why it feels different. Because for the first time in decades, Windows faces a competitor that isn't just philosophically compelling, it's practically competitive. And once users taste viable choice, they rarely forget it. Linux has entered a new era. And the ripple effects are only beginning.